which is also why we are a little bit later, because the Wi-Fi on Hamilton Island isn't as strong as we thought it would be. So we are now hotspotting from my phone. Yay for technology. With me is my dear friend and amazing entrepreneur, Shivani Gupta.
Hello, how are you?
Her handle in social media is Ask Shivani, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm going to ask her all sorts of questions because I have found a couple of things about you. So I will read some of your bio from LinkedIn so that everybody knows who we're talking about. Your background is that you know what it's like to overcome obstacles and to be motivated to succeed. And after studying to become an engineer and a self-professed math lover, which I love, you successfully worked your way up to the top of a male-dominated profession as an engineer with BHP Billiton.
I did.
And at the age of just 27, she had an MBA and was a senior manager at BHP Billiton. But now she's the author of Passion at Work, an experienced board member, business coach, international speaker, a Fairfax small business columnist, and TV presenter for SBS Risking It All. About 10 years ago?
Yeah.
2008. So Shivani is a rock star. She's a powerhouse, and I'm so excited to have this. And I mean, we say that we're in Hamilton Island, but we're on a laptop today because look at that. We are in Hamilton Island.
That's our view.
That's
so
our
cool.
view. So it's really sad. We tried to set the view up so that you could see it as well. But of course, with the backlight and the glare, it didn't work. So Shivani, how do you introduce yourself when you meet new people?
That's interesting. You know, when I was younger, I used to always do the professional update, a little bit like what you've read out from LinkedIn, because LinkedIn obviously is where we do our professional and our business connections. But now we're trying to have a bit more of a holistic view. I think that, it's really important to be a leader in what you achieve in your business, but it's also equally important in terms of who you are in your life. So I will often say along the lines of, I'm an entrepreneur, which took me a long time to get really comfortable with that word. I don't have any other entrepreneurs in my family. And so, you got a job and you did your education, and then you did more education and you stayed in that. So it took me a long time to get comfortable with the word entrepreneur, but I'm also a partner. I'm a mum to two beautiful kids. I'm a friend, I'm a yogi, I'm a meditator. And so I think there's different aspects of me as I've got older that are really important to realize that you are just not this one component. That's certainly in my 20s and 30s. That's all I would give people an update. And really a lot of my self-worth was linked into my work, and it still probably is, because that's what I wanted to be known for. Whereas now I'm like, I think I want to be known for other things.
Yeah, that's cool. It's such an evolution, isn't it? It's like a personal growth through business growth and entrepreneurial growth.
Yeah.
So you touched on the fact that it took you a long time to call yourself an entrepreneur. And I so relate to that, because I always were like, no, I just do things. Like, we have a business, but no, we just help people. And people said like, but you're part of the entrepreneurs organization. Aren't you supposed to be an entrepreneur? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so, but no. So how was that for you? What triggered for you that you went like, hang on, I am an entrepreneur?
Like, it was my definition of it. I think that I looked at, an entrepreneur as somebody that did something really big. So I looked at people like, Richard Branson or, Steve Jobs, or people that had done these massive billion-dollar ventures or multi-billion-dollar ventures. And I thought of them that. So I related that word in my mind to somebody that had achieved things at that global scale. What I didn't really understand about an entrepreneur is, an entrepreneur can be, somebody at the market who in Asia who works out how to speak in different languages to the person coming out of the hotel and is able to find that gap in terms of selling their product or their service into that particular gap and find that niche around that. And when I understood that, I thought there are entrepreneurs everywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, you can be a stay-at-home mum and be an entrepreneur in many ways in terms of what you do for your children. So when I started to change the definition of the word of entrepreneur, I think that helped me go, okay, I'm a bit more comfortable with that, because I was comparing myself to, as I said, those really big guys and women, and I didn't think I fared up. Whereas now I go, actually, there are entrepreneurs everywhere. And it's not about the size of it. It's that entrepreneurial spirit of being able to find a gap in the market, find a niche, and, hone into that.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I met somebody and I said to them, what's your business? And he said to me, he made the little plastic ties that go around the bread and the cookies and the whatever,
Wow.
his whole business. And it was a massive business. And, if you said, I just manufacture little plastic bits, but he just he linked it into that bigger why of the fact that it allowed food to be, that it was convenient. He might have a different view on it now with all the conversations about plastics, but,
at that time it was a good story.
But just that niche that he found going, this isn't being done well and I can actually, do that better.
Yeah. Isn't it always also that I love what you say, like everybody is an entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial spirit, that's what it's all about. Because looking back into my own story, like when I was a consultant, a management consultant, working for a consulting firm, I didn't feel different than what I do now that I work for my own business. So it's really that entrepreneurial spirit, isn't it? It's that how you approach your work and how you approach your clients and your boss and your team. I think that's more important than the title of, and entrepreneurs so blown out of proportion. Like, I'm an entrepreneur, and I go like, oh.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, when you also look at Ivanka, that training that we have, like I had people saying to me, oh, Shivani, you don't work as an engineer. Do you feel like you wasted your study? You never waste what you learn. You never waste that consulting experience. Never waste that. And I think for me, like when I look at engineering, which feels like a lifetime ago now, it was that notion of solving problems, right? So you learn how to have a problem, how to break it down, how to resolve it, and then how to action it. I do that every day. Like I do that with the kids, I do that in my work, and I do that with friends, and you're constantly problem solving around that. So I think you don't lose that consulting piece or your backgrounds, and this is a little bit woo-woo, but I think I've had some teachers say to me, it's not an accident you've done what you've done. Like the universe has got it designed for you. It's never an accident. At the time you can't see why you're doing this, but you can often then connect the dots a little bit later on.
Yeah. But often you also have to get triggered to make changes in the path that you're walking, the path that you're taking. And, you as an engineer, like you studied to be an engineer, you were really good as an engineer. You climbed up the ladder, corporate ladder, to a senior leadership role as an engineer, which already is quite remarkable because, you often get that Peter principle, like you have these really good engineers and then they go into manager positions and then they just don't know how to lead. So you already have that unique combination of being an engineer and being able to lead engineers in a corporate environment. But then you went to Nepal. What happened there?
I did. I had been wanting to go to Nepal for a long time. I grew up in India. I'm not a base camper or anything like that, but I wanted to trek through the Annapurna Ranges. And it was just after September 11. And so obviously people went into fear mode and a lot of people canceled their trip. I didn't really want to cancel my trip. So I checked with the authorities and they said it was absolutely fine for me to travel. And Nepal was this transformational piece for me. I think firstly, having been so busy and running constantly, it was the first time that I actually stopped. Like I had a month and I had a lot of time to think and be. There was like nobody else around. And so that silence, I think, when you're trying to create change, you need space, you need some silence. So I think that was a really, really important part of my life. The second thing was I just felt very touched by the generosity of the Nepalese. I expected people who were very poor to beg for food or money, and not one person in that whole trip ever begged me for food or money. And they were very generous. They would invite me into their huts. They would give me food that perhaps was their last meal or the only meal for the day. There were these very generous people and they lived as if they had everything. And for me, I came away from Nepal thinking, I actually have everything. I have this big high-paying job and I have the right car and I have the right job and I have this and I have this and I have this, but I don't feel very content and I don't feel very satisfied. And you can be good at being good at something, but you don't enjoy it. Or you can enjoy something and not be good at it. For me, it was the former. Like I was good at doing what I was doing in the corporate world, but I wasn't enjoying it. and I felt like it wasn't linked to anything bigger.
Yeah.
So that trip really made me, and I always say to people, you don't need to go to Nepal to find this, but you do need space.
Yeah.
And you do need some silence. And I came from that trip and made some pretty big decisions around my work and my relationship at the time and how I lived. And kind of, I wasn't completely clear on what I wanted to do, but my next step was to say, I'm going to start my business. I don't really know if anybody's going to hire me. I don't really know what's going to happen.
This is
but
what I'm going to do.
I felt really compelled. Now, not everybody shared that vision. My parents, for good reasons, you know, they'd spent a lot of energy and time and money educating me, bringing me to Australia at the age of 11. I think a lot of people around me went into some fear about, oh my God, you know, she's just having an early midlife crisis in her early 30s. But I was very clear that this is what I wanted to do. And I got just clearer one step at a time what I wanted to do in business. And that's been a whole different journey.
Yeah. And your business journey is so different from your corporate journey. Like your corporate journey, like you said, it was all about go, 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 you know, building your career, building your work. Now, I mean, I've known you for a couple of years now. We've been friends for a couple of years, and you are so driven by giving people insight into their passion. Like, it's really all about building people up, and especially women, building women up to be courageous to take the steps that are necessary for their life. To me, at least that's how I interpret what you do and how I see you.
Yeah, well, partly I think the Nepal story, right? Like I just noticed so many people, I wasn't very passionate about my work. And, you know, the global statistics are there's lots of studies that have been done on this over the last decade and longer. And every study shows approximately 87% of people are not passionate about their work. A lot of the research and data shows that a lot of women, and then that's been my experience as well, now mentoring women for over, you know, close to 20 years, is that a lot of women we subordinate our passions to our partners, to our families, to our children. And we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to say, hey, you're more important than that. But sacrificing who you are and what you're really passionate about, I always say to people, isn't the answer either. Because then what we expect sometimes is for some of that to come back to us, and it doesn't. And when we don't live a life of passion, you know, then it actually, that little regret, that anger or whatever feelings that there may be, infuse themselves into your relationship anyway. You know, like we're sitting in Hamilton Island, as we spoke about at the beginning of this live streaming, you know, to take 4 days out, you know, I've got young kids, to come to a conference, to have some time to yourself, to be able to connect with other entrepreneurs is not that easy, right? To take that time out and say to my husband, who has a big corporate job as well, you know, you'll be good. But to be in a partnership where that learning part is so important to me, like to go and learn, to read books and have space and time for that is really important. So I noticed that when I sacrificed who I was, it actually didn't do anybody any benefit. I thought it was going to benefit others, and it didn't. It not only did it not benefit me, in fact, it took things away from me, but I also ended up that regret and that anger infused into my relationships. And so one of the things I always say is that your life's going to go by pretty quickly, right? I've had some, you know, people close to my life pass away, some young, some old, some through COVID. And, you know, I mean, we know that. I know it's a bit cliched, but it literally is. And one of the things I say to people is that there's approximately 4,000 weeks in your life. You know, if you take the average age of a woman living at the moment, and I know that that'll change with technology, it's about 83 years. So if you round that off to 80, and we've got 52 weeks in a year, and you round that off to 50, you've got 4,000 weeks. You know, I'm 49 and I've got 1,550 weeks left. Based on that. Maybe
not that
a little
you're
bit
counting,
longer.
but
Not
you
that
are.
I am, but I am counting, right? And so one of the things I wonder is that, you know, I don't want to go to my deathbed with that music in me. I don't want to go to that deathbed with going, gee, I wish I'd spent more time with that, or less time doing this or whatever. You know, I one of my favourite authors is Bronnie Ware, who wrote 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she did palliative care for people in their homes with as people passed away. And she's written this beautiful book called 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it's the stuff we know, but it's how do you then make the changes around it? You know, not spending as much time with work, having time for your girlfriends. And again, as I'm getting older, one of the things I'm realising is That's so important, right? You can't have all your eggs in one basket. And for women, I think, to become clearer, a lot of women I ask, they go, I don't even know what my passions are. I have no idea.
No.
I've spent so much of my time living other people's passions and facilitating other people's passions. I don't even know where to start.
So why do you think that is? Because, earlier you said women sort of self-sacrifice and are so focused on other people, so that you don't know what it is that you want to do. So why is that so ingrained in global society? Because it doesn't matter whether you go to the US, the UK, South Africa, or Asia. It seems to be the same everywhere. So what is that? What is so ingrained in us to do that?
That is a big topic, Ivanka. Not that I was expecting you not to ask big topics. So this is just my perspective of the world, right? And it might be a bit narrow in this very short space of time. I think that the way that girls are raised, there is an expectation to be nice, to smile, to not stand up, stand up, but then be polite. And so there is a big expectation, and I know that there's some really great campaigns in Australia running at the moment about teaching girls about how strong they are, not how beautiful they are, how strong they are physically, mentally, psychologically, and really changing that frame of reference around it, not just about your outer beauty, it's also about your inner strengths and your physical strengths as well. And so I think the way, and society has done that, and I come from an Indian culture where I know that that's changing a fair bit and it's a lot more modern now, but there's still a lot of, pressure put on women. I mean, I was reading an article the other day that said through COVID, in Western worlds, not in third world countries, in Western worlds, the workload for the woman in the household has increased, right? So they would be working part-time, full-time, or an entrepreneur, with the family. And that's not to say homeschooling, right? All their workload's gone up. Not being able to go out and have that village and that community has made that really difficult. And so I think that societal stuff will take a long time. It's a generational change. I think, my generation's certainly a lot different to my mum's generation. I know my mum wasn't, allowed to work. She got married and had an arranged marriage. I have that privilege to be able to work and run my businesses and do what I like. When my children grow up and my daughter grows up, hopefully that will happen. It's, in my view, happening a bit slowly. I'm very impatient about it. But I think that, teaching girls at a very young age, not when they're 20 or 30 or 40, that's a reinforcement, but from a very young age, they can be whoever they want to be. They can be whatever they want to be. If they want to be a stay-at-home mum, awesome. If they want to be an astronaut, awesome. And we're talking about that, at a theoretical level. And some organizations, some families, some countries are doing a really great job of it. But we need to keep reinforcing that message that there is nothing wrong with you and you can be whatever you like. And I'm also loving watching some of the women who've had very successful businesses take a break. And some of them going, I'm just going to stop. So in Australia, we're very recently, like literally last week, we had Ash Barty, who is a Queensland #1 tennis player in the world, female tennis player in the world. She just won Wimbledon. She just won the Australian Open. And at, I think, what's she, 25, 26?
26, I think.
Right. And she's gone, I'm going to retire tennis. And, that is unheard of in the past generations. You did it into the ground. And so I think that role model even that she's providing to really successful 25, 26-year-olds, a 14-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 50-year-old going, even if when you're at the top of your game, you have choices in terms of how you want to live. And you're not doing anything wrong. If you feel like you've achieved your goals, don't stay there till you're 40 and be doing those matches in the circuit where nobody remembers your name. She's like, I'm going to do this at the top of my game. And I love that. I'm just loving the amount of the amazing women that are coming up all over the place doing whatever they want to do. And I think they're going to also really inspire the next generation as well.
Yeah, because it's such a strong point to make, right? Like there's so many tennis players that keep hanging on and then they're in their 30s, 40s, and everybody's sort of looking at them like, are you still here? When are you going to stop? And she's going like, nah, that's it. I'm done. All good.
Yeah. But it takes the amount of courage, right? Because people are going, yeah, but you could do this, and you
Your
could be
sponsorship and money.
you could be the most amount of, because a lot of money around sponsorships. And, you know, she talked a bit about her mental well-being and her goals, and it was time to do something else.
Yeah.
And I just go, that's somebody living their passions. It was a real passion for her to win Wimbledon. It was a real big goal, and the Australian Open, and she's achieved them. And now she's like, I'm not tied into that image of me.
Yeah.
That's one thing I do. Now I want to go and do other things, whatever they are.
Yeah.
So, I just think amazing.
Yeah. So you talk about goals, but you also are not afraid to jump into opportunities. I mean, in the little bio that I read, like The Risky Business, the SBS TV show. I mean, who would have thought that an engineer from Adelaide would be hosting a TV show?
They were like, we would like you to sort of be the host of that. I'm like, why? Like, you know that I have no TV experience. I actually found it fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because really what I didn't recognize properly at the time, because it was just over a decade ago, and it was a UK show called Risking It All. But the privilege of being able to walk into people's lives. So I worked with 4 business owners, different businesses, and you basically go into what they're trying to achieve as a startup or very early phases of startup, and guide them and mentor them. And, you know, one of them reached out a few years ago and said, hey, that was amazing, thank you. So you forget that privilege of being able to do that. And you know, I loved doing that with SBS, because there was also none of this huff and puff around it. You know, you did your own hair and makeup, you brought your own chair, and, you know, you flew in, you did some stuff. You know, it was done on a bit of a shoestring. But it was fascinating being able to go into people's lives, guide and mentor them, and you know, for them then to make some decisions around that.
Yeah. And what have you taken away from that experience that you continue to use in your entrepreneurial journey, or in your coaching or mentoring? Or
I think it certainly helped me. So I had my speaking, mentoring, and authoring business, which I've still got. But it was probably one of the catalysts to really go, I want to do other startups. So for me, just going, actually, I would love to have other startups. I love that little journey of the, you know, the ups and downs of starting a business, and obviously daily, even when you've been running a business for a long time, as you and I know. But it was really great to be able to go, I would love to actually do startups.
Yeah.
And so, you know, since then I've done 4 different startups. So I think that was a little bit of a catalyst. I think the other thing was that, you know, one of the people, for those people that watched it, many of you wouldn't have watched it, you know, one of the people that was starting a business was also going through a separation process. And to be able to have a conversation where the focus was on business, and then this particular person broke down crying, and we weren't trying to do that for television. He was just not coping, right? And I was just asking some questions, and he broke down. And I think that also gave me this insight into, it doesn't actually matter if you're really super successful in business, but if the rest of your life's falling apart, you know, if you're going through a separation, divorce, but a lot of people do, or, you know, somebody's sick in your family. And so we have to find that congruity between who we are on screen, literally in this case, and, you know, off screen. And I think the same thing, who we are in our business, we have to kind of show up who we are in our personal life, and vice versa. Yeah. And I think if you're 2 different people, then something's not right there. Something's inauthentic about that. Something's incongruent about that. And I always say to people, well, you know, which one's the real you? So again, I think seeing that, you know, gave me that insight into the fact that I really need to keep working on my relationships, my core relationships, particularly with my partner and children, irrespective of what happens. And, you know, not many people know this, Ivanka, but during some of the filming of that, we lost a baby. And so I was pregnant. We were very excited. It had taken us a while to get pregnant, and we lost our baby while we were filming that. And I fell into a bit of a hole. You know, I had wanted this baby since, you know, I even still love babies. They melt me. And as you probably saw at the conference, any babies on like
anywhere, like you go to a room and there's a baby, like
that's me. And so then to have this desire and finally meet somebody I really loved, for us to go through a journey of being pregnant and then losing that baby. And that happened while we were recording. And I fell into a really dark hole. And it also made me think about, my life was so busy. Like I was flying overseas, I was speaking at events, I was mentoring people, I was hustling. And one of my beautiful meditation teachers said to me, Shivani, I'm not suggesting that this is your fault in any way, but have you thought about the fact that you actually don't have room in your diary for a baby? And that was like,
stab in the heart.
Right? Because she was so right. So, if you don't have space for something, whether it's a baby or a project or a hobby or a passion or whatever, then it never comes in, right? And so my big learning also out of that particular show, even though I loved it, and there's a little part of me that, wants to get back into television and mentor people particularly and, get into their lives. I love that aspect of it. It really made me think that my diary was not clear.
Yeah.
And so one of the decisions I made after the filming of that show, and when it released, it got great reviews and it was the most watched business show on SBS in a long time and got over 1 million viewers, yada, yada. That was amazing. And there's about, I think, 30 schools or 40 schools that still use those videos in terms of their business series. So I was at a pub with some friends, and these beautiful, 5 boys walked up and they said, "Can we have a photo?" I'm like, "What are you wanting photos for?" "Are we watching you in the, year 11 business studies?" That was so cute. That was so cute. So the fact that that's happened and it leaves a legacy, which I didn't even know, is amazing. But as a result of that, I cleared my diary and I started to travel a little bit less, and I started to act as if I was already pregnant and we already had a baby. I set up the nursery. So I followed some of the things that I would have if it happened.
Yeah.
And, that was my big learning out of that show too, which is completely not business related. But, I ended up doing things differently as a result. So many learnings, really.
Yeah.
Haven't reflected on it for a long time. So it was a good question.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's you say like, oh, it's not business, but it is business because you are a business person and you bring yourself and your whole self to your business.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, oh, that's a business, like this is business and that is life. No, it's all encompassing.
Yeah.
So because I'm really intrigued. Like I've been talking to a lot of girls or a lot of women. I can't say girls anymore. A lot of women that have started businesses, and most of us seem to have started our business a little bit later in life, whether it's in our 30s or 40s or 50s. And funny that TV show is, risking it all. What's the risk mitigation strategy that you had in place, or did you just dive in head first?
I did a bit of both. Despite all the great corporate training and degrees, if I use the word passion, I used my heart and went, yeah, that's it. That's the business I'm going to go and run. One business I started, which was a failure, and a lot of learnings. What do they say? It's not a failure. It's just lots of learning. A lot of learnings came out of that particular one. Was I didn't even do a due diligence process. I saw a gap. It was a business that was being run down. I went, fantastic. I can take it and fix it. And the answer was, yes, I could take it and fix it. What I didn't cater for was 2 young children and 2 other businesses that I already had on the go. So I found myself working 70, 80 hours again a week. And I was like, what am I doing? Like burning myself into the ground.
This is not what I signed up for.
It's not what I signed up for. So it wasn't that if that was my only project, I think I would have made that really successful. But in alignment with other things that were already making money, that were already successful, that were starting to become a little bit less successful, and less time at home, less time with kids, less time for me, less time for my partner. I'm like, what am I actually doing? So I think the risk mitigation strategy, I've done it the wrong way and jumped into stuff. And then I come across some people, we in this amazing organization, Entrepreneurs Organization, where there's over 15,000 entrepreneurs all around the world, finding and doing, what they do best. And there are people I then meet, not only through EO, but also outside, who have just focused on this head part and gone, I found a gap that's going to make me a lot of money. And that's what they've dived into. And they have zero passion about that as well. And I don't think I can do that. I don't think I'm built like that. But I think what I'm learning from my failures and my successes is maybe the combination is the right thing, a little bit of passion. I don't think I could do something with all my heart if I didn't feel passionate about it, if I didn't feel a why or a cause behind it.
Would almost feel fraudulent.
Yeah, for me it would.
Yeah.
For others, I really admire the fact that they can go, Shivani, it's just a business model. It's just a numbers game. We can see the net profit. We want to build it from X to Y. And this is what the journey I'm going to go. And I really admire that. I just can't do that. I'm just not built that way. But I think doing it all out of passion and, this is such a great idea. This feels so good with no head, with no due diligence, and failing that business and losing a bit of money there was some really big learnings out of that too. So I think the risk mitigation for me moving forward is combining that head and heart, combining that intellect and your passion, and, doing the business model, doing the financial projections, talking to a lot of people in that industry, all the different steps that might be included in your head bit.
Yeah.
But then really feeling into the why and really feeling into what this business will do, and what it can create and the impact that it can have.
But that's where the engineer comes back as well, because she's the queen of spreadsheets.
I'm such a nerd. I am a nerd.
That's okay. Nerds rule. It's all good. So if you are to give like a piece of advice or experience share because there's a lot of women, and I haven't done my due diligence or research or whatever, but I have this gut feeling that there are so many women out there that are either in corporate jobs or just not happy what they're doing, and we're like, I really would like to start my own business. I'd like to be either in that startup or feel like I am an entrepreneur, but I just don't know where to start. And I mean, you've already mentioned the passion bit and find what you do, but numbers are also super important. So what would be your biggest sort of experience that you can pass on to a woman or a person like that?
Yeah, look, I think, really good question. And I'll try and do it justice, but I'm not sure I will. I think the first part is you have to know and get your why. Why am I going to do this business? Like, if I think I'm doing that because my boss is an idiot, it's probably the wrong why. Now, you might say, look, I want more freedom of time and I don't want to be reporting to somebody. The freedom is a really big value for me. And freedom of time is a really big value for me. So I want to work when I want to work. I want to be able to pick up my kids every day, and I want to be able to live the life I want. So, getting to that why you're doing, what's the personal reason or a business reason for doing that is really important. The second is, there have been people that have gone, I followed my passion and I've quit my job and I've started that business. And look, if you're in a financial position to do that, fantastic. But also using your head. So I always say to people, look, could you maybe drop back a day so you've still got 80% of your income coming in? Or if you can't afford to do that, could you find 2 hours a week, which is 1% of your week, and just go, this week I'm going to do a draft business plan. Next week, and literally put some actions down and give yourself 3 to 6 months of working on your passion and working on this thing at this stage, which might be a little bit of a hobby, and see if you can stagger the leaving the corporate piece and starting something, giving yourself some time and confidence. As I say, for example, you've got a service-based business and you need some clients, or a product-based business, and you go, I'm just going to start that at the, on the weekend. I'm going to do 2 or 3 hours. I'm not going to burn myself out, or I'm going to drop a day, and just gently ease into it if you can. If you've got the financial position to do so, great. And the other thing I would say is there is no way that I would be where I am unless you surround yourself with some really, really smart people, and I have had a mentor, usually a new mentor every year or so. Some mentors I'll, utilize and work with for a number of years. I had a session at 11 o'clock this morning with one of my mentors, who I catch up with probably every 2 to 3 months. And having people around you that can be sounding boards. Don't try and do it alone. And don't go, I can't afford it, I can't do that. In fact, you're better off spending some time and saving some money to go and have a coffee with somebody who has been there, done it, who's happy to, paid or unpaid. That's probably a better investment in terms of what you do. And, there'll be so many obstacles, right, coming into business, that you just need really smart people around you. And one of the things we say in EO is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You know, because if you're the smartest person, then everybody's tapping into who you are and what are you learning? Where is your learning and growth coming from? So you want to be around some different, diverse range of people. One of the things I did when I first started my business is every person I met, whether I liked them or didn't like them, I would ask them for 20 minutes of their time, either on the phone or for a quick cup of coffee. I would make the travel distance to go and find them. And my job was to meet one new person every week. So I went to lots of networking events. And if somebody said, hey, you know, we should catch up for a coffee, I would always make time for a coffee. I would drive to the other side of town if I had to. And I would literally then say what was my key learning out of that. And then I'd put it into a nerdy spreadsheet. And so because I think there's so much you can learn from people and what the mistakes they've already made, the learnings that they've already had, rather than trying to do it all yourself. So anyway, I've gone on there.
And you're sort of glancing over this, but I think that's the key. Like there's two key things in here. One is just do it, just make it work, but don't go in head first if that's not your modus operandi, because it's less risky and you feel like you don't have to do it all. But the second one, and maybe even more important, be aware of all the learnings you have along the way. Because a lot of us, myself included, often glance, you have this amazing discussion with a person, and then you come back and you feel really good and you have this sort of like, that was a really good discussion. And then 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now, you're like, what was it again that Shivani said? Like I know there was something important, but I'm not, what was it again? So just the fact that you stop and breathe and take time, write down your learnings, I think that's your superpower.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even like at this conference, right, it's really easy to fill up every waking hour with coffees and catch-ups and colleagues, especially because we've been in lockdown and finally we get to see people. And, you know, I'm really aware of that as we talked about that Nepal experience. I'm really aware of the fact that you need some time out.
Yeah.
You need, and when I come here, I go, I don't want to fill it every waking moment. I want to be able to just sit and watch the view and have a cup of tea. I want to be able to read a book, and I actually want to find some time to ground in, rather than kind of fill it. So having time to think and learn and hang out with some smart people is really, really important. Like there's no way, if you think you're going to be super successful and you're going to do it all by yourself, just because of your stealth and your drivenness and your goal setting, it, in my experience, is unlikely to work long term. Yeah. You need some people around you. Yeah.
So let's talk about this conference, because we're sitting here in this beautiful environment, Hamilton Island. It's been stunning. It's been absolutely amazing. But we're not here for a holiday, although it may sound and look like that to a lot of people. There has been a lot of learnings. We've seen some amazing people, met some amazing people, heard some amazing talks. What was your biggest, because you love learnings, what was your biggest learning from these 3 days?
Oh, that's hard, Ivanka. There were so many.
I know. That's why I'm asking.
So many. Are we allowed to talk about speakers and stuff? Some of the speakers we've seen.
Why not? It's not a secret.
Grace Tame, Australian of the Year 2021. I think for me, the key message, and I'm still integrating a bit of what she spoke about yesterday, I just love how unapologetic she is about who she is. And she talked about authenticity, and a lot of people talk about authenticity, but I really felt that with her. I felt that in the decisions she's making around saying no to certain brands. I felt that decision making in terms of, she copped a lot of, I felt unfair criticism around the Australian of the Year presentation with our Prime Minister this year, and not smiling and, doing that. But she's this unapologetically who she is. And that really made me think about, where am I not unapologetically me? So I started to think about, am I still teetering on the edges of being nice and put up with some not great behaviours at times, because it's really uncomfortable to bring that up. And so that,
like I said earlier, that is so ingrained. It's in our DNA.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I'm going, I'm a little bit inauthentic in those, and put up with that person, or why do I, why am I a bit nice to this? So that's making me think about it. Matt Baltel, oh my goodness, he had me in tears on day one of our conference. So he's this ex-Toyota engineer whose role was made redundant. He has decided to use his skills as an engineer to create bionic hands for kids who have no hands or have no fingers. But what was even more beautiful about his presentation was he set up a business called Free 3D Hands. And he's basically making them and giving them for free. So the recipient, rather than
he open sourced all the IP. So then they've created this bionic hand really cheaply. It's 3D printing. And then they open source all the IP so that everybody has access to it. So it's, as a business model, it's not a great business model, but it's a great value-based business model. And it made me think about, it's not always about the money.
It's not always about the money. And so, when he spoke, the learning that's, again, I'm still integrating some of the learnings over the next few days, I think. But what really made me think about was my legacy piece. And, he's creating a legacy, not only for those individual families, but to take his work, spend 6 months of COVID in the last 2 years, developing a manual and open sourcing it. I felt deeply touched by him, of his generosity and heart. And, he's living on next to nothing. You really need to go check it out, by the way. Free 3D Hands, 3 as in the number 3, hands.org. And maybe we can put that in the notes. And, you can start donating from $1. And a number of us have donated some money to him because we felt so moved by who he is and what he's doing, not just who he is and not just about what he's doing, but it was that real combination of head and heart. So many learnings, but they're the two that have really moved me at a very deep level.
And Grace Tame, just to go back to her, you've heard the story and you read the headlines, and then you see the person in, for real, and you feel her raw emotions, and you feel how she experiences everything. But the thing that I took away from that is the power of words, like the importance of choosing words. And I know we talk about news and headlines, it's all fear-based and it's all clickbait and all that sort of stuff. But what that does to not just a person, because she's trying to change legislation, that's a big thing, to change the use of words in legislation to have a better outcome for other, in her case, child sex abuse victims. For us being in, the risk management and self-assessments and compliance, the use of words, that really got to me, how important that is. Even when you go okay, this is a should have or a could have or a must have, it all seems to blur together, but it is not in any way, shape or form at the same level of importance as what Grace Tame was talking about. But that really hit me, words are so important.
That's a really great learning. And I think that, when you look at when somebody's been given Australian of the Year, we mark it as an individual, right? We go, this is Grace Tame. We have a perspective of her on when we watch the TV or watch the news or go online or whatever. But what I also recognise, what I felt when she was presenting, the legislation change and what she's trying to create with her foundation isn't never going to change what's happened to her. So she too, like Matt, has this bigger purpose of paving the way for the future generations of girls and boys from being, preventing the abuse. But if they do that, then there's protection for them and better laws and better legislation around that. And so they both had this really deep why, this really deep purpose. And that I always get moved by people that are so authentic about who they are. They don't, Matt's case doesn't worry about the money. Grace doesn't worry about what people think of her. They're so true to who they are and what they're trying to achieve in their world, and their contribution and their legacy is really amazing.
And also from a point of inclusion and diversity, because both of those speakers, because Matt creating a better world for everybody who wants a hand, like including everybody and have them have the use of both hands, which is, so normal for us, but for a lot of people it's not. And then Grace talking about her being on the autism spectrum, and that is not, it's not a disease, or it's not a disablement. It's just different. And to include, and as employers, that made me think as well that it's so easy to just take the mold of who you are and what you look like and what you do, and hire that kind of people in your organization. But
Yeah.
why not go outside of that mold? Because by adding in diversity, even at a really simple scale, the fact that the two of us are in a business forum together with males, we're the only girls, I am sure that creates a more colorful, rich experience for everybody in the room. So yeah, we need to think about that more, and we need to include that more. And for women to become entrepreneurs, and not to sort of think like, oh, it's not for me. That's a man's world, or that's what men are supposed to do. And I think the value passion based approach to adding value to the world through your business, I think we as women have a lot of potential input into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a great friend, and one of the things she decided to do, because she wanted to donate all this money to charity, and but she didn't have this desire to run a really big business. And so she would spend a lot of time organizing gala dinners and events and speakers, and she felt quite exhausted by the process. And then one day I was speaking to her. She said, Shivani, I've just decided to scale my business 50x, so 50 times the size it is now. I was like, wow, this is unusual. She said, I'm tired of doing all the charity work. So my bigger why of making my business 50 times is no longer about me. I just kept thinking that was about me. But because I want to give a lot of money away to charity, I think I'm going to scale it, and I'm going to have more money to give to charity without having to ask for it.
Yeah.
Without doing that. I thought that was so brilliant, right, in terms of what happens. And look, with regards to diversity and inclusion, some people are calling it, it's a bit trendy and da-da-da-da. Look, the results are there. When they look at boards, when boards have management teams, executive teams have 50% of women, and they have a diverse team, then their results, their performance, their bottom line is better, right? We know that when people with different thinking come together, whether they're entrepreneurs and they become co-founders, their business grows faster. And so diversity and inclusion is not a new fad. It's what the wise people have known for a long, long time. And really smart teams and really smart organizations have done it and will do it. The question becomes how you want to be left behind, or do you actually want to do that? I mean, bringing people together, and I keep saying to people, diversity and inclusion, a lot of people think it's just about females. And that is a really good starting point to get more women onto what you do, but also people with different ethnic backgrounds, different ages. And I also think, when I speak to a 20-year-old now that's entering a business, there is so much to learn for me. Like how they're using technology, what their mindset is like, what they have access to. I go, oh my goodness, I don't have that frame. I've got this old frame in terms of how to start a business. And so there's so much we can learn from each other.
Also, in addition to that, like the atypical neural pathway, like when you're, how did she say it? Like neural atypical, or not neural.
Your neural pathways are set.
Yeah. And that made me think like, okay, there's a lot of companies that really benefit from having a person on their team that is atypical.
Yeah.
What we call atypical. It's so easy to just brush them to the side and go like, oh yeah, no, that's it. I have to work harder to communicate with you, so let's not do that.
Yeah.
But I really think it's richer, and as a business you get better results.
Look, absolutely. I till recently had a very, very diverse team, and just the conversations and the experience shares and the learnings. And, even we've got a lot of men in our group. They're a pretty diverse bunch. I learn a lot by going into forum, and you have an issue there and you go, oh, I hadn't thought about that perspective.
Yeah.
And, there's some great global leaders, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, they all talk about how many of our patterns are already formed. So apparently, like by the time we're 35, I think it's like 90% of the way that you do things, you just keep doing them from that point on. 35 years of age, that's not very old, right? And so having different viewpoints coming in and continuing to grow your brain and coming up with new ways to think is great. Yeah. And I don't always have to agree with it. It doesn't mean that when you've got diverse opinions, you always agree with it. We're having debates in the house at the moment about how schools are talking a lot about not putting genders on different things. And so there's a fair bit of healthy debate going on. We don't all agree with each other's point of views, but we're at least having a conversation about it.
Yeah. So you said you until recently had a large team, so you have multiple businesses. So the current business you're focusing on, is that Ask Shivani? Is that what are you focusing on?
That is a very good question. I'm probably going to use the word transition. I think I'm transitioning, and what I'm not really sure about is what I'm going to transition to. So I have some options available in terms of what to do. One of the things I do love is mentoring people. And one of the things that I do really love is speaking. And one of the things I really love is just writing articles and doing that. So I think that, having that business, Shivani, for almost 20 years, I will continue to do that in some form, probably for the rest of my life. The question becomes what other things I want to do, and I'm not quite sure. I think I'm entering I probably won't go to Nepal back for this, I don't think, but I'm entering another Nepal phase of how do I find some space? How do I find some silence? How do I empty my diary a little bit? And what's in next? And I think this feels really different, Ivanka, now to before, that, at 49, almost 50, I know I've probably hopefully got another 40 or 50 years ahead of me, but it certainly is starting to make me think about the legacy piece, particularly from our speakers on this conference as well, and what I want to do longer term and what I want to do more for impact. My kids are still pretty young at 11 and 13, so there's still a bit of parenting. I think parenting's there forever, but certainly that busy period for the next decade. So whatever I do for the next decade needs to fit in really well with our family, but also feed my passions. So I'm not quite sure I have an answer to your question. I wish I did, but I don't. But what I do know is
But the answer is, the way I'm hearing it, is it's really important to take time to make big decisions. So at this stage, while Ask Shivani is still happening, you're making space for yourself again to make the next big decision, to figure out what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah. And after a very long time, right? That's been a long time coming to actually take some time out. And I also, haven't had a chance to, again, I think sometimes we're so busy looking forward, like that's my next thing, that's my next thing. We don't often reflect back on what the learnings have been, right? And you then move on to the next thing. And somebody said to me, maybe about 2 years ago, and they said, what was one of your favorite books? And can you make a list of your 5 favorite books? So that was easy. So I wrote my 5 favorite books down, and they said, have you ever gone back and reread any of those books? I mean, no, I haven't gone back and reread them. And I've now read 3 out of those 5 books because I really enjoy reading. And so I've gone back and I've had a completely different perspective.
Oh, wow.
Completely different perspective rereading that book. It feels like it was a new book. I'm like, I read this book. I took my learnings away. So I think sometimes, before you move on to the next thing too, and before you transition onto the next thing, to go, what were my learnings? Or shall I revisit in a good way, not reflect back and go, oh, that didn't work and that didn't work. I mean, when you've had some great learnings, and all 3 books have given me some amazing, deeper understanding of it. It's like when we do something over and over again, you get more out of it. Whereas I've traditionally been the person that says, right, well, that doesn't count. It's a new book, new podcast, new this. And maybe, just revisiting a fair few things that have had a lot of impact would make a lot of sense too. So I think, using the next few months to think, feel, rest, create, have some space, and maybe create, another Nepal, as we started talking about, in a different form.
Yeah.
And having some time to be.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like a really good moment to wrap it up so that you can write down all your learnings and take time and make decisions. But I learned something about you while I was researching, because even though we've known each other for years, I always like to read. Google is so much fun.
I'm scared.
I never realized that you have been on the side of a bus for an advertising campaign for South Australia tourism.
I loved, I grew up in South Australia. My parents live in Adelaide. The CEO at the time of SA Great was this amazing woman called Judy Potter. And I'm not sure if Judy knew that, and in hindsight, I look back on that, and she was just a great informal mentor and really guided me around those early days of business, and then asked me to be on this campaign. And look, I was pretty naive, and I went, sure. She said, look, it might encourage other people to be there. I was literally at a bus stop, and there was this bus that went by with my face on it. I was like, okay, I did not know that. So it's so funny that you brought that up. I just remember people going, you're on the side of buses. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that. So yes, so that was part of the SA Great campaign. They were doing some phenomenal work. I'm sure they still are, but phenomenal work when I was there. And I went on to one of their committees and their junior board to really have some input into how South Australia and a lot of places that could prevent the brain drain of people leaving Adelaide and moving to other cities or moving overseas. And they were doing some great work around that at the time. But I didn't know what I was basically walking into.
Yes. So another opportunity that has really opened up the world for you. So another learning, do not be afraid of opportunities. If you see an opportunity and somebody asks you to do something really weird that you're kind of excited about, just do it.
Yeah, I think it's true, isn't it? Like, we spend so much time procrastinating that. One of the things that certainly I've learned is you don't say yes to everything. You have your boundaries. But if it feels right and you've done a little bit of thinking about that and it sounds good, say yes and work out how later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said yes to this. Thank you so much for your
Thanks
chat.
for having me.
And I do have a little overview. Yes, it's the Ask Shivani one, but there you go. This is how to connect with Shivani. She is very active on LinkedIn. So you can always connect with Shivani via LinkedIn or go and check out her website at www.askshivani.com. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now we can go to the beach.
Yes.
And